Today we're doing a clutch change on the MX5 Mk3. I normally do all my jobs at home, on the driveway, that type of thing, but I've just moved into a new place. The driveway is really quite narrow. So what I've done is I've gone over to my friend at Hayden's and borrowed his lift, or rented it for the day, so you might be able to do that yourself. All the processes are going to be the same. I've just got a lift to help me out today because I just can't do it on my driveway. So basically, changing the clutch out because mine's a turbo car. It didn't have a standard clutch in it. It had an XEG stage 1, but from day one it wasn't particularly great and it slipped and smelled, and it's now slipping quite badly. Whenever the torque comes in, it just slips. So I'll show you the clutch we're going to put in, but basically we're just going to crack on and get this done. First thing you need to do when you can get to it before you jack it up is you actually need to take out the center console, because you need to undo the gear lever, I believe from memory undo some bolts on the top of the gearbox. There's also 2 electrical plugs on the top of the gearbox which you need to unplug so you don't pull them out when you drop the gearbox. So I'm going to crack on with that. Now we're looking at the center console here, some screws that you need to take out. You need to get your finger or screwdriver under the side of this, it clips out. Take that out, there is 1 screw there. Then in my messy box here, take the rubber out, there's another screw there. Let's get that one out while we're here. And then at the front end here, there are screws under here. So what you need to do is, let's get this one out. Okay, I'll try and remember this off the top of my head. Let's undo the gear knob. And then, I believe, there's another screw this side, forgot it. And that should release the console quite a lot. It's clipped in at the front, so you just need to pull it up like that. Clipped in. And pull that up so you can get things a bit easier. What you've got here, as you can see it, there's a rubber gaiter around the gear knob. It's held on by 4 nuts. I'm just going to take that off. So getting it to this stage is all you need to do from the top. You now can see the gear stick. There are electrical plugs, like I said, on top of the gearbox, but I'm pretty sure I can get to them from underneath. I'll put my hand round. So the next thing to do is to jack your car up. Obviously, if you're doing it on the driveway, you want to put it onto 4 good sturdy axle stands, so there's no risk of it falling. Don't just leave it on a standard jack, and obviously get it high enough that you can get the gearbox down and probably move it aside underneath the car. So just think about those things when you're jacking it up. But obviously today I've got a lift, which is fantastic. So let's have a look at some of the things you'd need for a clutch change. Doesn't matter what type of clutch you're going to use. This is obviously an aftermarket one that's uprated. This one is a competition clutch stage 2. This is rated up to about 330 brake horsepower, so it should be fine for what I'm using. Let's have a look inside. Comes with instructions, some basic instructions on that, some stickers. You then you get your this clutch cover plate for any one of those. You get your plate, which does have a right way round, which is the way round sticking out is the one that goes up against the flywheel. So you've got one of those. You then normally in a kit you get 3 things, or at least 2. You get your throw out bearing, a new one of those. You get a pilot bearing that goes into the back of the crankshaft. and then that's an alignment tool. So those are the basic things we got in this kit. I then also, what you should do, and it's in the instructions of the clutch, is you should either have your flywheel machined, so smooth again here on the mating face, or replace the flywheel. This is a second-hand one. It looks a little bit bad now, but basically this was completely brand new machined. Unfortunately got left in my garage and picked up a bit of surface rust, but it's absolutely smooth, so it should be fine. It does actually say, I believe, in one of the manuals that you should replace the flywheel bolts, these bolts here. So these, I'm doing that because I really don't want to be doing this very often, so I am replacing them with genuine flywheel bolts, up to you whether you do that. So those are the basic things you're going to need, and yeah, let's crack on. So obviously the gearbox is here. I've got a bit of oil leakage here that I want to inspect, and it could be the rear main seal, but obviously that's a separate job. So this, obviously your gearbox breaks from here. This is your engine, this is your gearbox. You need to get this brace out of the way and the exhaust, so I'm going to do those first. Once you've taken off the exhaust and the bracket that was going across here, the brace, then what you need to do is you need to undo a clutch servo slave, and basically it is bolted, 2 bolts, one there, and then just pull it, just slides out of this recess, so bolt there, pull that to one side, and then that's out of the way. So you'll get the importance of this later, but basically when you have a drive shaft and you've got a UJ joint at both ends, they have to be they be in line. So basically they can be out of sync sort of this way, but they can't be out of sync in 2 different angles. And the way it controls it on an MX5 was with this main strut. So what you do is there is a measurement you can take when you have the cross aluminium cross shield here. You can, I'll show it later, but you can measure between the two, and you can make sure that this is in a fairly good alignment. I don't have that shield, so what I'm trying to do today is I'm going to mark the middles of the bolt and the gearbox housing. So when you take this brace out, what's going to happen is the diff is going to want to rotate forward because it's only mounted at the back, so it's going to want to rotate on full. So what you want to do is you want to get a piece of wood and you want to jam it up behind the back of the diff and the subframe to stop it being able to swivel down. So get a piece of wood in there. At this stage we're going to drain the gearbox oil. This is your gearbox drain here. This is your oil fill. So we'll come to that later, but what we're going to do, drain it all out, because if you don't and the prop comes out, it's all going to go everywhere. So the best thing to do is just take it out and do it now. Now we need to take out this main bar. I've supported the gearbox on a gearbox jack. You need to put a jack under your gearbox, or however you're going to support it. You can get gearbox jacks for underneath cars to do that. Then I'm going to take the main bolts out of the support. What I should probably do as well is undo the bolts to the Propshaft diff. So I've got to do that first before I take the last bolts out. So I've taken the main brace out, I supported the diff with a piece of wood, and then I supported the gearbox from underneath. I've undone these, taken the nuts off, so I'm just pushing out the bolts. There you go. And then there should be enough slack that you just push it forward, there you go. And then you slip the yoke out of the back of the gearbox. There you go. So the whole gearbox is now being supported by the engine and this jack. So what I want to do is I just want to let the jack down slightly. It will tilt the engine and gearbox on the engine mount, should be fine. There's then 2 wire connectors at the top of the gearbox. And then I need to take the bolts out from around the bell housing. So next you need to take out the bell housing bolts. Normally there are 2 at the bottom. One of mine is broken and one of mine fell out, so that's something I've got some new bolts. There's 2 up here that go into a bracket, and then I believe there's 2 across the top, and then you've got a couple on the other side, so you should be able to see them. So let's get these out. So these ones are just 2 nuts because the 2 bolts go in from the other side. first bolt, and then just feel your way around the bell housing and find others. What I find is you normally have to get an even longer extension with a swivel on and just get it to the top of those bolts with a ratchet and get those loose. So just work your way around the bell housing. So once the gearbox is out, it's these 4 connectors that you had on top of the gearbox that needed unplugging. And then if you look at the gearbox there, it's these bolts that were done up at the front. So yeah, so now we're going to be looking at the flywheel and clutch. So now we've got to this stage. This is your clutch pressure plate. You've got the plate behind it, your flywheel, and then obviously the engine. Mine's got some oil leaking that I've known. There's been some misting on the gearbox. I think it's the rear main oil seal. So I've got one of those. But basically now need to get the cover plate off. And then the pressure plate should ease off. Give it a wiggle. There we go. And there's the clutch out. As you can see, it's got some heat spots on it. It has been slipping. And this is the plate. Yeah, that's pretty much shafted. So yeah, so that's the kind of what you should be expecting when a clutch has been slipping. So now what you'd need to do is you'd need to get this, either get it re-skimmed, so basically take it to a machine shop and then skim this surface to give it a nice fresh surface for the new clutch plate to bed to, or you can put a new clutch flywheel on. Obviously a brand new one would be really expensive. You could find a second-hand one, get it machined beforehand, and then at least you're just swapping it over. That's one way of doing it. So what we need to do now is I'm replacing it. So I'm going to take these bolts out, and then we also need to get the pilot bearing out as well. So the pilot bearing, there's two ways, a couple of ways of doing it. You can even have the proper tool, which basically goes in, some grabbers go behind the bearing, and you slide hammer it out. Or if you don't have that tool, you can use the bread trick, and it does work because I used it recently. So basically you get a roll or some bread. Sounds crazy, but you keep stuffing it into the middle of the hole, and you want to get the pressure behind it. So you get a bolt or something like that, and you just keep hitting it in, putting more bread in. And what happens is the bread expands behind the bearing, and as you hit the bread in the center, it pushes the bearing out, and it does actually work. So let's get the flywheel off. So I've taken out the bolts holding the flywheel. It should just slide off the main crankshaft. So there you go, that's the flywheel off. This is your rear main oil seal. It seals against the block and also against the top of the sump. So this looks like where it's been leaking. Can leak from the main seal as well. In the center section, I mean. So yeah, so let's get that pilot bearing out. So this is part of a pilot bearing removal tool. So basically it has these fingers that expand at the end. So you push that into the bearing. You then do up the piece behind it, which then spreads the fingers and it grips the bearing behind, and then you pull it out. That is the theory. They can be fun. So we get this tool, we're pressing it in there, you then get a spanner on one end of it, and I've just grabbed an adjustable. So basically you're doing that up inside the bearing. That one's bottoming out. It is grabbing behind, but sometimes they pull through. Then you get the slide hammer, and you do that up inside this piece. And then, as the name suggests, you've got a slide hammer. Sometimes they come out easy and sometimes they don't, so I'll come back when I've finished. So this is your rear main oil seal. As you can see, there's oil remnants here. There isn't any along the sump or anything a bit further forward, so that indicates that it is this main seal. I think it's this joint along the sump here. So you need to get this off. You don't have to drain the oil because the oil should be in the bottom of the sump. So now I'm just going to get a screwdriver behind it and just pull that forward. So when I pulled off the rear main seal,
Oil did come out, so from what I said before, you wouldn't need to drain the oil. It probably is best to do an oil change at the same time. So drain the oil out, and then you've got your filter there, so it's easy to get to. Then you've got remnants of sealant all the way along here, so we're just letting it drain out because we're going to need that face to be dry, and then I'm going to clean that sealant off and then replace that seal and put it back on, but just let that drip for a while. So I've cleaned up the groove inside the sump here that's at the bottom, and I've cleaned up this mating face here. I've jacked up the back of the engine just slightly to stop the engine oil dripping. Right, okay, so this doesn't have any gasket, but you need some RTV type gasket to go in the corners here, because the corner where it all joins, and then along the bottom. I'd rather it squidge out a bit. So there you go. I've then got an original OEM Mazda rear seal. The Mazda one doesn't come with this tool. I got this tool from an O-rings seal that I've done previously. Basically that helps it centralize on this sprocket here. A little bit tucked in on the felt there. Right, let's get those bolts in. So there you can see it's got all the gunk around there. It's not particularly pretty, but just making sure this corner where 3 items come together, that's where you want it to be sealed. It looks good. These are £7 foot, these little nuts, so not very much at all. We don't have a small torque gauge with us, so we're just using feel. And then this is when you need to pull this out. That little felt one is stuck in a little bit more than I want it to be. Let's see if we can sort that out. So now, you know, earlier we removed the pilot bearing, so you need to put a new pilot bearing in. That's the shaft of the gearbox to go in. It's a little needle roller bearing, and it has a seal on one end, and the seal needs to be pointing outwards. So that needs to be tapped in. It can be quite tricky. I've got a socket that's just slightly smaller, and we're going to give that a go. Do it until you can feel it bottoms out. Right, that's not going any further. So just putting on a different flywheel. This one has been machined. It doesn't look as pretty as it did when it was first done because it's been left in my garage. I've got brand new bolts with, they've got screw lock on them, thread lock on them. It doesn't say in the manual that you have to use brand new bolts, so it's up to you. These are genuine Mazda ones. So putting these in. These bolts then need doing up to 82 pound-foot. You've got to hold the engine from turning at the same time. There is a proper tool for that, or you can use a bolt and a screwdriver to hold the flywheel. So that is most probably what I'm going to do. So put a bolt in, you can then put your screwdriver against it to hold the flywheel. So 82 pound-foot. Is it? Oh, you're joking.
Just talk up to what it says and then.
Oh yeah, so you can watch it. Okay. Now you've got your flywheel on. You want to use some brake cleaner, some solvent cleaner to make sure that there's no grease on it. So that's obviously the friction surface. See, did have dirt on it. So then you want to also degrease your cover plate disc, and then we're ready to put the plate in and then the clutch cover. So now you've got the surfaces clean. This came with an alignment tool. So basically what it's doing is it's trying to align this pivot. So pretend that's the gearbox, the gearbox is going in there and they're trying to align it all. So when we put the clutch cover on, it's all clamped down and you can't move the plate, that you'll be able to slide the gearbox in and that the splines of the gearbox will fit into this. So while we're doing this, use that. There you go. It's amazing how it doesn't even go out to the sides of the cover. So that's holding it in place, that's where you want it. You then get your cleaned cover like this over the top. You see here there's 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So basically the stud goes in the middle. And then the bolts go in the holes, obviously. So then just start doing them up. These go up to 22 pounds-foot. Try and do them up evenly as you go around. Now I'm just going to torque these up, 22 pound-foot. So let's have a look at the gearbox side. Obviously there's a lot of carbon here, there's a lot of build up on the back of, so this has been slipping badly, back of the throw-out bearing. This is your arm that was in here, and it via these springs it clips onto this ball here. So what I'm just going to do is brake cleaner, get some brake cleaner, and then good old kitchen roll. Should clean the ball that the arm sits on. You're going to need to grease it. So you've done that. What you're going to do is you're going to put a small amount of grease in these fingers, not a lot, because you don't want it spinning out and going all over the clutch disc. Like I said, you're going to put some on here, which is all this. Let's clean this out. Try and get into the cup where the ball sits. Clean that out. Oh, I pulled off the spring, not too worried. Now we're going to get some grease. We're not going to use very much. Like I said, we're literally is a little bit. Rub any excess off. It's better to get your hand in there. Tiny bit on that, not a lot. The bearing goes up and down this shaft, so I would put a tiny amount on that. Like I said, put it on the ball. Probably put a bit in the cup as well. There you go. This does run, I can't remember which way around it goes now. Goes like that. This does run in here, so I'm just going to put a little bit on the back here. People will probably shout at me. There isn't much there at all. Okay, I'm going to put that on afterwards. So you've got your bearing. I do not believe it has a top and bottom orientation. It just slides on there. And then what you need to do is slide that back through there. You need to slide it past and then into the middle of that sprung. Oh, I need to go on here first. Okay, so put that on there. Get the lever. Feel it go into the spring. There you go. That's setting that ball. And then I think there's a, put that on first. And then at the same time, push that in there. There. And that's what the motion is. So when you're pressing on your pedal, it's pushing that forward, pushing on the clutch. Let's get this in. There you are, that's everything ready for the gearbox to go back in. Right, I missed a bit of filming. We've lifted it up on the jack and we're just about to put it in, hopefully. Right. We'll probably go forward about another inch and then we'll move into. So connect your electrical connectors, the 4 on the top of the gearbox. Don't forget that, otherwise your reversing light won't work and probably something else. So that sounded nice, didn't it? Maybe not.
That's it.
There's it.
Nice job on turning.
Yeah, it works well sometimes.
I don't know, doesn't it?
You just need 2 people to do it.
Definitely, yeah.
Right, what we got?
If you need a twist, let me know. I'm close enough. Just going in the dowels.
Where's the light?
So,
I'm sitting on a dowel on this side.
just getting the dowels on.
It'll pull in.
Yeah, this side's going in easy.
There you go.
Top job.
Top job, thank you.
Nice. You won.
Yeah, that was probably one of the better ones. So it's all about getting the splines of the gearbox to obviously go through your new plate within inside your clutch. One of the tricks is to put the prop shaft in the back, and as you're pushing, turn the prop shaft, and hopefully you're aligning those splines, and it'll go in. Then you get it on a couple of dowels, get a couple of bolts in, and you're away. So now, just going to do up all the bolts from around the outside. So I've got the bell housing bolts all the way around, fully bolted up. I've also used screw lock because I have found that they work their way loose. So I've done those up. I've put the prop shaft back in. Got to do the bolts up at the back. And now I'm going to put the strengthening brace in that holds the gearbox to the rear diff. Like I said before, this is your alignment between it's the pinion angle between your diff and gearbox, so it's actually quite crucial, and I'll show you some details on that. So these bolts on the back going into the diff, they're static. They've got a pin that goes into the diff, so you do those up and then that's set. And then what you want to do is, because of this pinion angle, and I haven't got this brace to measure it, I made these marks earlier from the gearbox onto the brace, and I'm just going to make sure that they match up. I'll give you some information on how to measure it properly from the brace, and there's a set measurement you measure, I think, between this and the brace height, and then that sets your pinion angle. It's really important to get that right. So I'm just going to finish this off, and then I'm going to do the exhaust. So I've got the exhaust on, it's all done up, and done up at the front. So the gearbox and everything's all done up. Just need to fill the gearbox up with gearbox oil. So that's this one, takes around about 2 litres. Keep filling it in until it starts to dribble out of the top, then put the plug back in. I'm filling it up with some Muttle Gear 300. Great stuff, it's GL4 and GL5, so you can put it in the diff and the gearbox. I find this greatly improves the cold shifting. Still not perfect, but massively better. Yeah, it's good stuff. So when filling it, the best thing to do is, because what you have is you get a bottle, and even if it's got a lance on it, you find that you've got about a quarter or 1/3 of a bottle that you can't get in because you can't get the bottle up far enough. So the best thing to do is get one of these syringes. You can get them from Amazon. Syringe your oil. So then put that in your top fill, and then push your oil in like that, and just keep going until you got it full. Last thing we're doing is putting this brace back on. It slots on one side, so the best thing to do is put a bolt in slightly so it can catch into it. And then those have got open ends. Slide them on there. And then come over here and put the other ones in. There you go, that is the full underside. If you've got this metal cross member, you can put that in, but otherwise that's all fine. Just going to put some brake cleaner on here to clean off where a residual leak, to make sure I can check to see if it comes back. But that is basically how you change a clutch and a rear main seal on a Mk3.